those shared experiences build this sense of loyalty and trust and true community of people that you can lean on when you need them, that you can call them up out of the blue and say, hey, can you come over and watch my kids? I got to go take care of something, that they would come, no questions asked. When the curveballs come in your life, it's not if, but when. Do you have people that you can truly rely on that will come at a second's notice? To me, that is true community.
Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspect of running, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. Imagine a world where running injuries don't exist and every runner stays healthy. That's the world I want to live in, and that's exactly the world that Recover Athletics wants to make happen. Recover is the first prehab app for runners. It instantly generates custom prehab programs made up of strength, plyometric, and mobility exercises to help loosen tight muscles, get stronger, and run your best. Their team designed it with top physicians and marathoners like Meb. It's guaranteed to make you a stronger and more injury-proof runner. If you want to fix your aches and pains, get stronger, and set PRs, go to the App Store right now and download the Recover Athletics app today. Thank you to Tracksmith for their support of For the Long Run podcast. Tracksmith is a Boston-based running apparel brand born from a desire to celebrate both the history and the evolving culture of running. Tracksmith recently released their fall collection, which was designed to celebrate the seasonal shifts as we find our rhythm this fall. I have been loving their Van Cortlandt long sleeve, which pairs well with the Alston half tights on a brisk fall day. Welcome back. I have Nick Willis joining me on the podcast today. Nick, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. It's great to meet you for the first time, Jonathan, and see what this is all about.
For sure. So the first question of this podcast is a tough one, and I didn't warn you about this. Who is Nick?
I much prefer to not be given questions ahead of time, so that's much better. I'm 38, but I'm a kid at heart. I grew up in New Zealand in a small town, Lower Hutt, and everything that raised me that way, that loved to do all different possible sports as competitive as possible, was a kid that had the freedom to roam the streets and the fields and skateboard and catch the public transport into the capital city, sort of like a New Yorker kid might be able to. That's carried over into my life here in the States as a father, as a husband. I still like to just have a lot of fun, and I'm hanging out with 25-year-olds every day and training for the last 15 years. So I feel like I'm sort of stuck in that twilight zone of being a 25-year-old all of the time.
That's awesome. So the $1 million question is why? Why are you still doing it?
I ask that to myself all the time. If you had asked me 5-6 years ago, are you going to keep running after you stop being a professional runner, I said, absolutely not. Like, I don't have any interest. But as different stages of life happen, as I said, I'm a father now. I've got 2 young kids. And right now I can say the number one reason why I still run is because it's my number one social outlet. We've got a squad of like 10 to 20 people that hang out 2 or 3 days a week, not just running, but we go to we have a private gym that we have access to where we shoot hoops and play loud music and lift weights. And it's an awesome time, especially as someone who works remotely in his own basement, and just to go hang out with the other guys and shoot the breeze and talk about other things in life. And I have to be fast to be able to hang out with those guys because I got some of the best training partners in the world. So that's why I still do it, because it's my main social outlet.
Very cool. So something you mentioned initially that I want to touch on more is you mentioned as a kid you just did all sorts of sports and you were skateboarding and playing basketball and this and that. Was that an intentional choice by your parents, or was that sort of how you wanted to go about living your life?
No, I think it was just part of the culture in New Zealand. We're sort of known as the jack of all trades, masters of none sort of thing. Because sports are primarily done through the clubs in New Zealand and it's volunteer coaches and all that sort of stuff, at most you would practice once a week, sometimes not at all. You would just compete in the competitions. So you had the rest of the days of the week were free to do other stuff as well. So you might play 2 or 3 sports in the same season, or you might have other recreational activities like skateboarding or going down to the local golf course. Me and all my friends, we all played golf, we all skateboarded, but none of us considered them sports that we played. Those are just like social recreational activities whenever we had free time, sort of thing. And it was just a safe place to have the freedom. I guess like the Sandlot kids back in the day in that movie, we roamed the Hutt Valley and we looked for things to do. One of the highlights of my youth was just sort of roaming around construction sites looking for plywood or coping or metal poles to make skateboard ramps out of. And yeah, that was sort of the way that we were raised in New Zealand. And just so happened that running is a activity that most sports include anyway. So I was always sort of honing that element of what I became later on, even though it wasn't the only sport that I was doing exclusively.
Do you remember your first run? Your first run that was like an explicit run, like I'm going for a run.
Well, there's 2 parts. See, I actually started competing in track and field as a 4-year-old. My family was fully involved in the equivalent of Junior Olympics track and field. Back in New Zealand, it's called athletics. And these were like picnic type meetings where the families would bring your picnic basket and you'd set up under a tree. It was a grass track, right? And then you'd do the high jump, the long jump, the relays, the shot put, and all of the sprints as well. And you'd do all of those different events and you'd go back to your mum or your dad in between races and grab a popsicle or a sandwich or whatever. So I was always doing that. Wednesday club nights, we would do the same thing. But I don't think I ever went for an actual run, just to go for a run until I was maybe 15. I did, because I was a sprinter and a field eventer up until that point. And the idea of actually training, I think my dad intentionally kept me away from the idea of having a coach and doing it as a sport from that perspective until I was about 15.
What was that first run like?
Well, my first ever training session, it was still on the track. It wasn't a run. My dad connected me with a coach, and the coach said, I want you to do 4 300s. And I was 15. And I think I was trying to impress him. And I went out and I did the first one in 45, and then the next one in 50, and then 57. And he said, all right, let's call it a day. And then we slowly went for like some like 20-minute runs around the river and that sort of thing. But yeah, I never was a big fan of just going for runs. It wasn't really until my senior year of high school that the idea of actually like logging mileage and like building fitness that way was something that I actually bought into. I was always a fan of just doing track workouts as a kid. But I do remember I went for like an hour 25 run on a weekday when I was a senior in high school, and I passed a buddy from school. This was after school, obviously, and I went out on my own and I did this really hilly run. We live in a pretty hilly city. Yeah, it was like 20-minute climb and a 20-minute down and all of this stuff in between. And I was like, I just ran an hour 25. I'm going to the Olympics, baby. So I really I started to own that side of things. And he was like, yeah, good for you, Nick. But like laughing at the same time.
That's awesome. And then that happened, right? Did that actually become a tangible goal, or was that like an offhand comment that you made in that moment?
Well, I was fortunate, and I am fortunate to have an older brother who's 8 years older than me. And he had sort of gone through and paved the way for what opportunities I had in life. And running was one of those. And he went to college in the States before me. He went to a D2 school, Western State in Colorado. And he was a D2 national champion, and he ran a sub 4-minute mile. He never made it to the Olympics, but he was really close. And so we always knew that like if I continue tracking and beating his times at the equivalent ages and stuff, that there's a good chance that I might be the one to just cross that threshold of hitting the qualifying time. I never thought beyond that, like to actually be competitive at the Olympics was a whole nother thing. I remember watching the 96 Olympics on TV. I was 13. And there was a New Zealander in the 1,500 meters, and he came dead last in the prelim. But I still thought it was so cool to see a New Zealander on the start line. Like I just thought, wow, that's amazing. And I wasn't at all like, I didn't think anything that he came last. I didn't care at all. So I just thought if that could be me one day, that'd be really cool.
I think that's one of those examples of like representation, right? We talk about that. I've had conversations with athletes of different ethnicities or nationalities, and they're like, I see myself, or I want to be that person on the start line. Is that sort of where it clicked for you that like that could be you? And what did that set off?
Absolutely. And it wasn't just that race, because that was 96. So I was maybe a freshman in high school. And then when I slowly started getting more seriously in running, when I actually took ownership of it, I wanted to learn as much about the sport as possible. And the internet didn't really there was nothing called running internet back then. There were no letsrun.coms or all that sort of stuff to find out that information. This is 99, 2000. And I would go to the local library to see if there are any running books, and the books that they had there, I actually have them in front of me. You got No Bugles, No Drums by Peter Snell. This is Steve Ovett's book. I didn't read that one, but they were basically all of the great New Zealand milers: John Walker, Peter Snell, Murray Helberg, Rod Dixon. They all had autobiographies. And so I went and read those front to back, everywhere in between. I just like devoured that information. And it was that representation, as you're saying, I could get inside the minds of these legends, and they weren't intimidated at all by lining up against the foreign athletes from all over the globe. Like, they actually were the guys at the forefront, and they really felt like they were the best. And so I started carried over into how I viewed myself, that I don't have to be intimidated or think I don't belong at the same time.
Very cool. So this is 99, 2000. Your first experience with the Olympics was 2008. Is that correct?
2004 at the Athens Olympics.
2004. So talk to me about the years leading up to 04, and what did the preparation look like, and how different was it then versus your preparation now? If you were to, shoot, you've done it for a long time and you continue to do it. So like, talk to me about 2004 versus maybe 2016.
Yeah, I think everything started for me my first year in college. So it wasn't actually in 04, but like 2002 was sort of my breakout year. I'd gone over to the States. I started to not just be an 800-meter runner, but embracing being a distance runner, cross country and all that sort of stuff. And I was running PRs every day in training, just of all these distances I couldn't even fathom competing over, tempo runs and the like. And then by the time that we'd finish cross country, we'd finish indoors, and I was just fried. Like, felt like I'd been competing every weekend for half the year, and I just needed a break. And I even went to the World Cross Country Championships. I got an invite to compete in the 4K, and I came back from that back in March, and I said to my coach, Ronnie, I can't come back to practice for a month. I'm so emotionally burnt out. Like, I need a break. Give me a month and I promise I'll be back for the outdoor season. And normally that's when like cross country teams in college gear up to just crank the start of spring. It's like, let's get serious. But I was fried. And so what I ended up doing is I was running every day. I'd run 10 to 12 miles, but I was running hard because I was like, well, I'm out of my own. I might as well, I can't just jog around. So I started hammering these runs. And then when I would get back to the track, I would see the sprinters out there every day. So every second day I'd put on my spikes and jump in if they had some sprints to do, like 6 by 100 or 8 by 150. So basically I was running like 90 miles a week, and I was doing these all out sprints 3 or 4 times a week. And then when I came back to practice at the end of April, Ronnie said, all right, we've got to go to pen relays now. You haven't been training, but we're still going to chuck you on the first leg, and let's hope you got something. And I just felt like $1 million. Like, I've never felt better in my career. And I ran a 2:49 1,200 meter split. And that opened my eyes. Like, wait a minute, if you extrapolate 2:49 for 1,200 meters to the 1,500, if I could keep that pace going, that's a 3:32. So that's suddenly when I started to realize I'm not just potentially going to be an Olympian. I actually could be a medalist one day. So that was the light bulb moment for me in my career. And so always in my career from that point on, I've always done that period in March and April where I take a month where I don't do any workouts. I don't train with the team, and I just go on, I call it mongrel March, where I just go on hammer. But I'm not doing anything scheduled. It's just totally how my body feels, and then do my sprint training. And it's always been, I think that's the one area of training I do differently than most other competitive runners. That's my break from coaching and whatnot. So that really was what got me going in my sort of view as an international runner. Now, going into the Athens Olympics, I did the same thing. I redshirted my outdoor season so I could focus on trying to qualify for the Olympics. And I fortunately did that. But it took me so long to qualify for the games. I think I got it on the very last possible day. In a race in Rome, I'd been stuck at 336, 337, 336, 337. I needed a sub 336 to qualify. And on the final day of qualifying, I ran a 332 in Rome. So I was the relief that I qualified for the Olympics, but I still had 6 weeks to go until the games, and I was just hanging on to the final fumes. So the difference between the Athens Olympics and all the other ones was that I was more concerned about qualifying, and then I had nothing left once the games came around. In later years, I qualified the year ahead of time. Because I'm a New Zealander, I don't have to do trials. So I was able to just put all my chips into peaking in August. And that's why I was able to come away with better performances than what people probably thought of that I was capable of.
Very cool. Another piece of your running career is the longevity of your breaking 4 minutes in the mile. So how did that evolve? And it's almost 2 decades long at this point. So at what point did that become like something that you were thinking about doing versus something that was just happening?
It really didn't become something I thought about until maybe 3 years ago. Someone had posted something on a Let's Run thread listing those who had the most consecutive years. And it was talking about John Walker and Steve Ovett and Steve Cram and Steve Scott. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not far behind those guys. So then it became a thing. Maybe that was 4 years ago. And it turned out that particular season, I only ran one sub 4 minute mile, and it was the very last race of the season. It was at the Long Island Mile that Kyle Merber was putting on. And so I was really fortunate that I did get a sub 4 that year, because I'd been racing 1500s predominantly that season. And then from that point on, I always ensured to make sure I scheduled a good crack at the sub 4 each season. But being a New Zealander, living in America, it gave me opportunities both indoors in the US, outdoors in New Zealand, and outdoors in the US. A lot of other people don't have the same opportunities to run miles. It's more the metric mile these days in Europe.
And you've got an exciting one coming up December 31st of this year, huh?
Yeah, well, it's very nerve-wracking. Well, the idea is that in order to get to the 20th consecutive year, it needs to be in 2022. But I'm not a spring chicken by any stretch of the imagination anymore. So the earlier I do it, the more likely I'm going to be healthy and my body's still working. So on a stroke of midnight, we're going to have a crack at it at the New Balance Track and Field Center in the Armory on New Year's Eve. So yeah, we've put on a gala, a party, a celebration, so to speak, that happens to have some track races sprinkled throughout the evening. So the idea is we want to sort of create an elevated experience for the running community, but it's not your traditional track meet. And my race will sort of be the final one of the evening. As people count down from 10 to the stroke of midnight, the gun will go off, and I'll see if I can do it one more time.
Very cool. So I've had the honor and privilege of having Tracksmith sponsor the podcast for the last couple of months. And this continues through January as well. And Tracksmith is actually putting on this gala. So talk to me about how somebody who's interested in participating in this, first, thank you. And second, talk to me about how somebody who's interested in being a part of this can do so.
Well, first and foremost, we wanted this event to be more than just about running. And so it's a gala, it's a fundraising event for our new foundation. And so last year, behind the scenes, we were supporting a gentleman named Russell Dinkins, who was sort of at the forefront helping the fight to reinstate several big NCAA track and field programs that had been cut. Clemson, who were the football national champions at the time, Minnesota, William and Mary, and Brown University. And so we want to double down on those efforts. And so the foundation has appointed Russell as the executive director, and the funds from this event are going to be raising money for the foundation. And in addition to fighting for collegiate participation, we also want to help just youth participation in our great sport in general. So at the Midnight Mile, we're both going to have an awesome in-person experience. So we'd love for people to come along, and if they're in the tri-state area or on the East Coast, come on into New York City to the Armory. Let's have an awesome party together and raise some money. So you can either buy a table, get an individual VIP ticket, or just general admission. And then we'll have silent auctions and other ways to raise funds as well. But then we'll also have a streaming component And one of my heroes, Steve Cram, he's going to be announcing my particular race. But we're also going to be doing it more as like a New Year's Eve broadcasting experience where we're not really focusing on the races as much, but more just talking about the sport and celebrating the new year and all that sort of thing. So yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun as well. So any way that you can promote the event or participate, how it fits with your schedule, we're greatly appreciative of that. And I'm going to lay my body on the line to give you guys some entertainment as well.
What are you most excited about for it?
I want to hear the crowd going nuts down the last 200 meters. Like, we're going to bring everyone up onto the track to lane 3 or 4, create this tunnel experience because all of the VIPs will be on the infield, and it'll be a lot more of an intimate experience. And I'm doing it with my friends, and my training partners are going to be the ones pacing me for this particular race. And my coach will be there, and my wife and my kids as well. So it's going to be fun to celebrate normally when your race is the last in the evening, everyone leaves and you come out of drug testing and there's no one there. This time we're going to have an after party for another 2 hours afterwards. And so I actually get to stay around and celebrate with everybody. That's going to be awesome.
Wow, only 2 a.m. Isn't that early for New York?
Yeah. All of the awesome volunteers and workers who are willing to sacrifice their evening, they're going to get home eventually.
That's true. I just got the chills when you mentioned, coming around the last 200 meters of the track. Is that something that you visualize in practice?
It's not so much in practice, but on the boring, grinding runs, especially long runs when it's cold. It's December in Michigan right now. You say, is it worth it? And you picture that moment and say, absolutely, it's worth it. Like, that's the stuff that makes those less than exciting days, well worth the sacrifice.
One of the things that I liked about how you highlighted the experience is you talked about all the people that would be there with you. It's not just your race. It's a race for your training partners, your wife, your kids, everyone who's following along. And I think that there's a lot of power in bringing people along for the journey. We see this with a lot of professional athletes. Not a lot. We see this with professional athletes, and I think it's a really empowering way for an amateur runner to feel connected and have a vested interest in following the journey of an athlete. Has that always been your approach to training, or have there been times when that hasn't been the case?
In college, I was a pretty selfish, sort of focused person, and it was me versus the world to a degree, and I wanted to prove that I was more disciplined and more serious and more willing to make the sacrifices than all my quote unquote lazy teammates. That's the way I sort of viewed it at the time. But then once I was out of college, I suddenly realized how ungrateful I was for that community and that was already built around me. And it was quite a lonely experience first couple of years as being a pro. But once I got married and slowly built a community and a team around me, and my wife kept me accountable, that became the forefront of the focus. And anytime I was getting sort of a little selfish about things, my wife would quickly remind me, you're nothing without all of these people that are helping you. And so she would be a really important accountability in my life, and to the point now where it's naturally built in. I definitely wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that community that has supported me through. I mean, I've had way more valleys than peaks. It's just that the peaks are the ones that are sort of publicized a little more.
For sure. Recover Athletics is a supporter of not only this podcast, but also my own running. It was built in Boston by 2 lifelong training partners who got tired of aches and pains getting in the way of their training. In 90 seconds, their app will customize a program for your body and your training. I plugged in some of my more common aches and pains, and I got a custom-built program designed to strengthen the muscles and tendons that will help avoid these issues going forward. Your first custom prehab program is free, and they have an unlimited free trial. You can get it on the App Store right now by searching Recover Athletics or click the link in the show notes. If you like it and want to upgrade, their premium subscription costs less than one trip to a PT. Give Recover a try today. Your legs will thank you. Thank you again to Tracksmith for their support of the podcast. I've been a fan of Tracksmith and their community-first efforts ever since my early days of running in Boston. As my miles increase again ahead of some big goals this coming spring, I'm definitely doing it in comfort and style with their gear. I'm also proud to partner with Tracksmith because they're going to donate 5% of your order value to the Michael J. Fox Foundation for all orders, and you'll also get free shipping. The Michael J. Fox Foundation is dedicated to finding a cure and helping those living with Parkinson's. Both of my grandfathers have or had Parkinson's, and I'm grateful of Tracksmith's support for something so personal. Visit tracksmith.com/forthelongrun to see some of my favorite pieces, and all orders that start from that page will contribute towards this donation. So you've had a long career, starting as a professional athlete and continuing for many years, and now you are in it in a bit of a different way with your work at Tracksmith as athlete experience manager, where sharing the journey is really important in today's digital marketing world. So I'm curious your perspective on like how social media and how marketing has evolved over the last 20 years, really, both in your own career, but also in your observations of the industry and how the industry has shifted.
Yeah, I think it was the Wild West initially, and we didn't know, as athletes, didn't know how to sort of get it out there. And so it was a lot of look at me, look at me, look at me, social media. And maybe that was because of the age that we were in, but it's like you suddenly realize people want to be able to relate to you more, and you let other people talk about you. And so now there's been a movement in the last decade to more of this team approach. And so you lift up your team, and then your team will lift you back up, vice versa. So you don't have to. There used to be this whole like Throwback Thursday hashtag that people would use, but it was like, oh, look at me when I used to win this race, or oh, Prefontaine's coming up. I remember when I did well at that race, and those are just so cringeworthy moments. I think athletes are getting much better at allowing other people to elevate them more and getting more involved, commenting on other people's posts now. And websites used to be a big way that we used to do it in the past. Each athlete would have their own nickwillis.com or whatever it may be. But now it's primarily through either the Instagram page or a YouTube channel. But the YouTube channels that are most successful, they're storytelling experiences. It's not just look at my workout. It's giving people a glimpse into their normal life, but in a way that's not always just look at me, look at me.
What I found to be fascinating is that a lot of athletes have the realization that they're relatable and they want to share their journey when they get injured. And a lot of athletes will actually, at least my observation is a lot of athletes will have their social profiles grow the most or see the most engagement when they hit those valleys and as they're climbing back out of it, right? Like it's not very approachable to see somebody who's winning all the time because that's rare, and that doesn't, there's no feel good story. I mean, it's nice, but there's no true like humanity or relatable lessons from something like that. Whereas it's been an interesting shift where it's been less of a highlight reel and more of like a real life.
And it humbles the athletes. So when they're humble, they're more able to speak on the same level as well.
Totally. I was chatting with Kara Goucher about this recently, and she's been going through a period of her life that is challenging. And it's fascinating to see somebody lean into that and see what comes from it. Obviously, nobody wants to struggle, but to see the support that somebody gets when they are struggling, I think only carries forward or does carry forward into the good times as well.
It's definitely become more of an open book these days. It goes back to what you were saying before about people sharing during their challenging times. I think people in the past were fearful that their sponsors might end up not wanting to see when they're not doing well, but it's not about performance as much now. It's just as much about how relatable you are to their customers. So there's more of an encouragement to just be who you are, and that's what will help keep your sponsors happy also.
And that's what will keep your sponsors happy. You heard it from someone who is doing that. So talk to us about your role at Tracksmith. What are you doing on a day-to-day?
We're a startup, so pretty much a bit of everything. But that's what I love about it. We're not a small company by any stretch of the imagination. I think I was the 24th employee. Now we're up to around 40. So there's still a lot of different departments. So I can work cross-functionally quite well. But my three main areas, especially last year, I was more focused on supporting our elite athlete side of things. The amateur support program is our main vehicle for supporting athletes. And that's our hope in 2022 to have about 150 athletes in our program that will help facilitate that. But I'm also heading up our events division now. And so the Midnight Mile is one of those, and a lot of community events that we'll be doing next year. And then thirdly, Hair AC is our subscription based customer model. And so working with our more loyal customers or people who want to feel a little closer to the brand. So I also manage that program as well. But we're a startup, so we all do a little bit of everything. And that's what makes it so exciting. You feel like you're part of a team. Anywhere you can see a gap or something that needs to be done, like just go and do it. And the whole company or the ship will be raised. So that it really feels like that.
Yeah, it's so fun to be a part of a team like that, particularly when it's small. I joined Inside Tracker when there were like 8 or 9 of us, and we have almost 100 employees now, seven years later. And so it's really cool to see that evolution of it's a team. You do it. You're part of something. You put in the work. It's just like training, where no one single day or event is the make or break, but it's the brick after brick after brick. And the running analogy is absolutely perfect for that.
And I'll be honest, like for much of my life, I haven't been a very good team player, but like this has been, I grew up playing team sports, but then I got stuck on this running world and it was very much a me thing. And so it's been so fun, both from a work standpoint to be involved in, I feel like I'm playing a team sport again, but I also am playing rec basketball again. And so I'm really loving that element where it's being a cog in a bigger system. It sort of takes the pressure off a little bit, but it also adds pressure in different ways. So it's refreshing to do something quite different.
Where was that switch? Where did that switch happen where you went from less about me to truly being that team player?
It's been on and off through my running career when I trust my coaches or whether I want to like do the training that I think that is right. But I would say after the 2012 Olympics, when it didn't go very well, that's when I had to humble myself and start. If I wanted to keep enjoying the sport, I needed to do it with others sort of at the forefront. The Very Nice Track Club was founded around then as well. So that really was a big part of it.
Very cool. What was it like to see the Olympic trials in 2020 where it seemed like a quarter of the field was wearing Tracksmith?
Well, firstly, I've never been to an US Olympic trials before. I'd always, what's the big deal about that? I've been to the actual Olympics, right? But it really is a really cool experience. And there's so many more emotions involved. And so to be fully immersed and involved in that and being on the other side of the fence and cheering on these athletes who I know personally, and we were taking care of them. That was really, really special. But also from a brand perspective, it was unique to feel like you had a team that you were cheering for. It made it way more fun to be a spectator. I've been sort of burnt from the sport in a cynical way through my experiences competing against dopers for the last 15 years. So this was the first time I really, really enjoyed being just a spectator again, and I was totally free of all of that sort of mindset.
One of the things that I've talked with other guys about is the difference in the number of, we're getting back to social media a little bit. I've had conversations with Peter Bromka and a couple of other athletes around like the storytelling aspect. And every time I see someone doing it well, I want to ask about this. So my feeling is that there are a lot more women that are sharing their story and telling the journey and this and that. And then on the flip side, you don't see as many guys doing it. And so I'm curious your perspective on that, given the fact that you do it and what you see with your job.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy using Twitter. It's not a primary like marketing tool to use Twitter, but it's my way to sort of interact with these different niche communities that I'm involved in. So as a Detroit Pistons fan, there are very few of us out there. So I'm not going to be able to invite people over to my house to watch a Pistons game. So I got to like connect with them on Twitter during every game, right? And so running has sort of become that world also. And so I don't care. Like I'll get into like talking about really weird stuff that no one else cares about. But those people who are in that little world, I'm happy to do that. But I think even if someone's not interested in those niches, they get to learn about me more and the storytelling of like, oh, that's weird that there's this New Zealander living in Michigan who cheers for the Detroit Pistons, who's also really interested in trail running, even though he's a miler. Like there's all these like random elements. And so it hopefully makes me more relatable for people.
Cool. Let's talk about trail running. When did you go for your first trail run?
I mean, most of my life, that's all I've done. When you talk about going for runs in my hometown, the idea of running on the road was unfathomable because we've got mountains right out the back door, basically. They're 20-minute climbs. And then once you're at the top of them, then you're just going up and down along the ridge tops until you come back down again. So that's how I was sort of brought into the sport of distance running, was just doing these trail runs. And that's the way you got your legs strong. And then you did track workouts twice a week and then put the two together and you got the perfect marriage.
Do you think that you'll be doing any trail racing in the future?
Maybe. I'll never say no to anything. I honestly have no idea what trail races are out there. I've never been to a trail race in my life or even know what they are. All I do know is that there are some really fantastic multi-day hikes in New Zealand, or tramps that we call them, that you can't access to run on unless you do the race. Then you're allowed, like they open it up to runners just for that one particular day. So I'd like to do some of those ones. But yeah, it'd be fun to maybe use that as a vehicle to go visit Iceland or some random location.
Do you have dreams of running really far on trails?
I don't dream about racing long distances.
Or running, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. What's really far? Is it 20 miles or is it 100 miles? If I did really long stuff, I'd probably prefer to do what my cousin does, and he does more FKT over sort of like seldomly traversed areas where you got to find your own way. That sort of stuff might appeal to me to do like once a year, as opposed to like just a race with 300 other people.
Cool. Switching gears a little bit, what does success mean to you?
Oh, that's a tough question. I've always been a goal setter, both really attainable goals and ones that are more challenging goals to attain. So I think success is whether I'm able to tick off those boxes. If I've set those goals, and I'll do what it takes to make sure that I do my best to have a chance at getting those. And that's been a story of my running career. And now I'm trying to apply that to my work life at Tracksmith and as a dad, and for my rec basketball team as well. And yeah, I think success is whether I'm able to achieve the goals that I set out ahead of time.
How do you go about setting those goals?
I think it's just my wants and my desires sort of tapered down to what's realistic. Okay, I want this, but is this really attainable? And is it worth the sacrifice? And is it worth the opportunity cost of the other things that you could be like working towards? Because no goal is worthy going after unless you're having to make sacrifice, right? But if the opportunity cost may not be worth it. So the marathon is like probably the number one thing where I continue to look at the opportunity cost and think, sure, it would be cool to like see what it's like doing a full marathon block of training and like getting a time. But do I really just want to be exhausted the whole time 24/7 and not have the energy to play with my kids on the trampoline and to do all of the other things I have in my life right now? Probably not. And so that's the thing that I keep sort of putting in the back again, because it's not worth the other sacrifices that I'd have to make.
Do you think you'll do it eventually?
Maybe as like a non-competitive runner who's like trying to do his best when I'm like 47 or something, when my kids are a little bit older maybe. But yeah, I've got a real job now, so I always have to like push them away while I'm doing work anyway. So I hate the idea of like just being, I mean, when you're in college, nothing's better than hammering a long run, going to the dining hall, eating a bunch of food, and then sleeping the rest of the Sunday away, right? As a parent, you can't do that. Like, you want to be doing stuff with your kids in the weekend. So that's the number one thing for me.
I'm going to guess you're the kind of person that can't sort of half-ass it. Like, you're either all in or you're not doing it. Is that true? No. I can half-ass things, but that I wouldn't consider the outcome a success. That's just for fun. Got it.
So I half-ass my basketball team. We play once a week, and I won't shoot any hoops any days in between or anything like that. And And that's fun. I really enjoy like not taking things pretty casually as well. But if I'm really going to commit to something, especially running, it's be more give it everything.
Very cool. What does community mean to you? I feel like you're someone who is so in the community and touching it in so many different ways. I'm curious what that relationship is, or what that definition is for you.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think I sort of dwell back on it every now and then. Even today, I was thinking about it. Sure, it's like an element of where you have social interaction and you have fun and like you feel like you're not lonely and all that sort of stuff, and it like keeps you entertained. But I think those shared experiences build this sense of loyalty and trust. And true community are people that you can lean on when you need them, that you can call them up out of the blue and say, hey, can you come over and watch my kids? I got to go take care of something, that they would come, no questions asked. When the curveballs come in your life, it's not if, but when. Do you have people that you can truly rely on that will come at a second's notice? To me, that is true community, and that's where church can be extremely beneficial. It has been in my family's life, as we've gone through a lot of different tragedies. My mother died when I was a kid, so they sort of supported my family through many years of having a single parent household and all of that sort of stuff. But then more for me lately, even though we do go to church, our community has been more the very nice track club, the running group, not just my training partners, but the coaches and medical support, our physios and parents of Hobbs Kessler. They're people we can rely on. If our kids suddenly need to be rushed to the hospital or something, they'll come and take care of that. So it's really nice to know that we have people, even though my family's all the way in New Zealand, that we can basically call family.
The chosen family.
Yeah, that's right.
The family get to choose.
Both ways.
Yeah. Talk to me about your relationship with religion as it relates to running. Does it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're choosing to have a faith, then it impacts all areas of your life. I saw more so see parallels that I love, that what makes my running life a lot easier than many other people's is that a lot of the disciplines which I've chosen because of my faith happen to benefit running anyway. And so the number one thing is treating your body like a temple. Like, don't put toxins into it that aren't going to be good for your body. So that means I look after my body. I go to bed early every night. I've never stayed up late or partied and all of that sort of stuff because I want to look after my body. And so it hasn't felt like I've got to I can't wait for the season to end so I can just go on this big booze binge like I used to in high school sort of thing. But I think the other element of it is that the number one challenge to myself as a Christian is to be content in all things and not be jealous or expectant that I deserve more. And so in sport, you always want more, but if you think you deserve more, you're always going to be disappointed and angry at the result or outcome. But if you're content with where you're at, doesn't mean you're not striving to be better, right? But content that it's not like, well, this sport owes me this, or I have to be running faster because I've put in so much work. Like, contentment has definitely allowed me to appreciate my results, whatever the outcome. And sometimes they're not very good. Sometimes they're extremely good. And I've been relatively even keel throughout that experience.
Is that tangential or comparable to gratitude, or is that something you practice in a different way as well?
Absolutely. Contentment and gratitude come hand in hand. And whenever I go and speak to schools or I'm trying to give a motivational speech to young athletes, it's like, how do you deal with nerves is the number one question that people give me, right? Like, I'm always so nervous on the start line. And I'm like, well, the number one way that I deal with nerves is that I ask myself the question, like, do I want to be here? Yes, I do. Like, I dreamed of being in this situation. Like, as a kid, there's nowhere I'd rather be right now than on the college cross country team or at the New Zealand Championships or at the Olympic Games. I was fortunate. Like, there's no room for nerves when I'm like so thankful for that opportunity. And then you turn those nerves into excitement. Like, wow, what an awesome opportunity. And so even when you're dealing with all the different injuries, I've had 5 stress fractures, 5 surgeries, a handful of different muscle pulls and all that sort of stuff. Sure, you go through the grieving process, but ultimately you're grateful that you've even had a chance to get to that point, and you'll come out of it eventually.
I think what you said about the do you want to be here aspect is particularly helpful as we're entering winter here in the States. And many of us in more northern states have to go through the like, oh, it's 10, 15, 20 degrees out. Do I want to do this? So talk to me about that component as well. Does that fit in there for you as well? You mentioned it's, winter in Michigan now.
Yeah, and sure, I've complained about cold weather before, and I went to New Zealand many winters to get away from the snow so I could get the work in. But the truth is, like, it's boring when we go to Hawaii. My college roommate's from there, and the weather's the exact same every single day. Like, you appreciate the nice days when you have the hard days. You appreciate the good results when you've had bad results in running. As a parent, what's really helped me enjoy winters again is seeing my kids, like, they love winter. They love all seasons. They just happen to be outside and doing that. And there's nowhere they'd rather be than having a winter. And so that's totally like helped me be grateful for, yes, it's snowing. Yes, it's icy. Okay, we can go ice skating on the pond, or we can make a snowman or go sledding. Like, there are really cool things. And so, yeah, I guess it's that like victim mentality. Are you always going to be a victim and feel like life is always out to get you, or are you going to be grateful for whatever you have and make the most of it? And so, sure, I may not go for a 20-mile run when it's 10 degrees. I might only go for 12 miles, but I'm still grateful that I can go outside when most people are still stuck inside because they don't have the health to, and they'll get depressed because they're not at least getting outdoors during the winter.
Yeah, like what you said about appreciating the good days because of the bad days. There's this, the reel that everyone's posting on Instagram lately is the song, Can We Skip to the Good Part? And I posted something like, you can, but then you don't appreciate the good part as much as if you had the not so good part. And this was particularly poignant on a run this past weekend. It was 2 miles uphill to start in very windy conditions, and I like almost didn't do it. I almost turned around, and I was like, this isn't fun. But I was just like, wait, it will get better. And I think it was and it did. And it was the perfect epitome of like, you have to put in the work in order to benefit from it. One of the first podcasts I did was with Magda Boulay, very accomplished marathoner and ultra marathoner. And one of the things she said was she trains for these moments of flow. She trains for the moments when it's so perfect and it feels so amazing. And she's like, that could only happen a couple of times a year. But you have to put in that work in order to get there. And you can't appreciate how good it can feel if you don't have that, wading through the shit as well.
Yep. And it's the same with injuries as well. Like, you hate injuries at the time, but nothing feels better than when you're finally healthy again. It's like, wow, you really appreciate just the simplicity of just being able to take a couple of steps with no pain coming through your legs. That's the ultimate gratitude that you take for granted every day when you are healthy.
Absolutely. I had my first serious injury at the beginning of 2020, and I came back into running at the start of the pandemic. And so here I was like running for 20 minutes or doing a run walk for 30 minutes. And it was like the best part of my day because of everything else that was going on at the time. And so it was amazing how appreciative I was to have the ability to just move in March of 2020 more than ever before. And again, I probably wouldn't have chosen to not get that injury looking back on it with the perspective it gave me going forward.
But you'll never choose it ahead of time. If you ask me, do you want to get an injury next week? Absolutely not.
No way. I could go on and on about this topic with you. I think my last question for you will be around, let's fast forward. It's midnight on January 1, 2022, 12:00:00. The gun's about to go off. What are you thinking about?
It's going to hurt, but that's okay. It's going to hurt, but that's okay. That's what I've been telling myself the last 3 or 4 years as I've gotten older, to not be afraid of the pain. I think as we get older, we become a little more pain averse. We sort of avoid it in our older age, whereas we embraced it as a kid. So I need to just remind myself that it's okay to be in a state of pain.
I love that. Well, we'll be cheering for you, and can't wait to see what happens about 4 minutes later.
Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Of course. See you out there. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next time on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. This podcast and the accompanying music has been produced by Brian Walters of Single Track Sound. For the Long Run's logo was created by Vanessa Wolf of Sterling Wolf.